For those who have careers that keep them out at sea for long periods of time, what is the creepiest thing you've seen out in the water? Not so much what I saw, but what I experienced. I was once underway in the Gulf of Alaska during a November gale. Waves were up to 35 feet, with some rollers hitting 45. An uncommon occurrence on the diesel-electric ship I was on was a cycloconverter tripping. When this happened, the ship would temporarily completely lose power and propulsion until some electricians could reset everything. This happened during that gale. I simply can't explain how strange it is for the boat you're onto all of a sudden go so quiet that you can clearly hear waves slapping the ship and metal bending and flexing. Knowing you're completely at the mercy of the sea. Knowing that if the ship lost its bearing and went beam to, there was a real possibility of capsizing. It's easy to forget when you're at sea that the only thing keeping you alive is a bunch of steel welded together. At that moment, I was fully aware, and it humbled me. Thankfully, we trained frequently for this and had everything fired back up relatively quickly. Another time I recall was when the ship took a rogue wave. They are absolutely real, and I believe they account for a massive number of shipwrecks. It was late at night, and I was on the bridge. We were passing through a storm, and we're taking the waves off the bow with no visibility. As the ship moves, there's normally a pretty standard pattern. You ride up a wave for a bit, and then you fall down the wave for a bit. Well, we started riding up a wave and got to the point where we should have been starting or ride down, but we just kept climbing and climbing. And then it happened. We started our ride down the back of this massive wave. All of us braced ourselves and tried to find something to hold on to, but we all fell to the deck anyway. Anything that wasn't secured for sea fell down all around us. Manuals, tables, computers, printers, you name it. Our captain, who was sleeping, called up to the bridge asking if we hit something. It woke the entire crew up. Rogue waves are real and they're terrifying. I can't imagine being in a smaller boat or taking one of them broadside. I was in the U.S. Navy for about 10 years and have 10s of thousands of miles at sea in an aircraft carrier. Countless nights on the flight deck in the middle of the night and middle of the ocean. Creepiest, a huge patch of the ocean glowing, like nuclear waste in The Simpsons glowing. I've seen bioluminescent algae of a few kinds, and this was nothing like it. I've never seen anything like it before or since. Weirdest thing, hundreds of miles out to sea from land, and there was a massive fire on the water. It was like the top of a gas refinery, but on the water with nothing under it but water. Flame going a few stories into the air. Saddest, a fellow sailor trying to jump overboard. He apparently got a Dear John email and pictures from his cheating wife and decided to end it. We were on the smoke deck, he bummed a cigarette, then asked the time. We said 2300. He replied, "Sounds like a good time to die," and in one motion tried to launch over the chest-high wall with an opening to the water below. Luckily, we were faster than him. We grabbed his legs and wrestled him down and laid on him and basically hog-tied him till the MAAs, Navy cops, got there. Broke my heart because he was a good dude. I never saw him again. He got transferred off the ship shortly after. Not sure what happened to him, but I hope he's doing better. Funniest, 2 flying fish collide mid-air. I was smoking when we were in the Persian Gulf and saw the fish fly from a pretty far distance towards each other. I remember thinking, there's no fucking way they're going to hit them. Splat splash. I was in tears laughing, but no one saw it. Everyone just thought I was a weirdo, but I got to see a miracle of nature, lol. Some 20 years ago, on the MV Explorer, since sunk, down near the Antarctic Circle, sailing around the bergs and occasionally making landfall, we rounded into a small bay area, and there, amongst the ice and coast, was an unmarked sailing yacht. Which is odd, as generally yachts have some identifying markings on them. To add to it, they didn't respond to any radio contact, and whilst I wasn't privy to the conversation, and it was a long time ago, Some crew went across via Zodiac and were refused boarding. So basically a yacht, not a particularly large one, that was unmarked, was hanging around in the inhospitable waters of the Antarctic and didn't want any help or contact. Proper weird. I used to be an oilfield diver in the Gulf of Mexico. I'd say about 80% of the dives I logged were at night, mostly 500 feet and under DSVs. It's very eerie feeling sitting on the downline doing in water decompression in the middle of night. I'd always ask topside to turn off my headlight like a worm on a hook, just bobbing in the darkness. Somewhere in the Atlantic, nice cold as fuck night, decided to step out and look at stars. About 10 minutes on, and a boat's mast pops up, sits there a few minutes and then back under. No alarms, nothing. Just some sub-boys getting a bit of late night at 2 in the middle of nowhere next to some friends. Not so much creepy as eerie, but being out in the blue at night in a lightning storm in a slack wind. The ocean was very flat, no big rolling swells, just tiny little ripples. The whole world would be black, and then there would be a flurry of bolts, and the whole world would be silver. The ocean looked like nothing so much as aluminium foil that had been scrunched up and flattened out. The water looked like mercury, and all the little ripples made these very dramatic black shadows. This sort of qualifies. Former Navy here. Somewhere off the coast of Italy saw a very, very small boat, not much bigger than a rowboat, about 9 or 10 miles offshore. This was sometime around midnight. There was no light from land and no other ships around. It had a light. Our ship captain said it was a fisherman, and the fish would be attracted to the light at that time. Imagine being in a rowboat about 10 miles offshore in the middle of a pitch-black night, waiting to see what finds you. One time on an airport trip, my Uber driver was saying that he used to do security on tankers, that they would run across empty vessels more than you could possibly imagine, just floating, contents undisturbed, wallets, photos, everything. They would hail them with no response, and not knowing if it was a trap to get close enough to take over the ship. Pirates and ransoming the ship is apparently also more common than you'd think. Not the people, though, just the cargo. Anyway, the security team would have to board the ghost ship and scope out the situation. Even yachts. When there was no one aboard, they would sink them to avoid floating strike risks. I was like, surely there is some kind of finder's fee, and he was like, who are you going to call? Made me really wish a John Krakauer or Sebastian Junger would sink his teeth into that story. It would be a hell of a book. Edit. It seemed like there was no central body to call to salvage it. You're in international waters, so there's no Coast Guard. He implied that anyone who lost track of a ship like that likely lacked the resources, desire to retrieve it. I imagine the ship recorded in their log when they came across other vessels, but whether that information goes up to some authority IDAK. Being myself in supply chain management, I know that oceanic shipping can be seriously sketchy, so although I can't corroborate the story, and part of why I posted was to see if it scared up any similar stories, it was related to me as fact, and didn't strike me as a tall tale.